I'm really, really, really happy that you agreed to do this. I couldn't quite believe that you said yes and that you had enough time because you obviously a busy guy. So thank you very much.
No, thanks to you. In any case, it's always nice to chat about design with passionate people.
So Fabio, where are you at the moment?
At the moment, I am at home in Tokyo, in the center of Tokyo. Actually, the area is Chiyoda-ku, which is the most center, I would say, department of Tokyo, where also the Imperial Palace is. But I'm not in the Imperial Palace. I'm nearby, but not in the Imperial Palace.
And you've had like a long relationship with Tokyo, haven't you?
Yes, I have a long relation with Japan overall because it's 32 years since I started to be connected with Japan because I came to live here and work here in 1989. And it wasn't in Tokyo, it was more on the countryside, which at that time it was also a quite pioneeristic experience because there was no, of course, no websites, no internet, no World Wide Web, no emails. So it was really being in a totally different universe coming from Italy to Japan at that time. And then since then, of course, I spent 4 years at that time. And then since then, I kept having a lot of contacts and coming and going to Japan for work. And now I'm back in Japan since 2018, definitely. So I'm living here in Tokyo now.
But Fabio, what took you to Japan in the first place?
I would say, I don't know if it's chance, but sometimes chance you have to build it up, for sometimes things comes and you have to be able either to be ready to catch them, or either maybe you were there waiting for them already. So in my case, probably it was like that. So I I started to work. I studied in Italy, and I started to work in Italy in the middle of 80s, while Italian car design was probably at its maximum peak, maximum level ever. And it was quite good to be in Italy at that time, and it was quite there were a lot of possibility also to work for design studios. I started right after the design school while I was still doing university at architecture university because I was studying also architecture. And but I started already to work as a beginner in a little independent studio, and this independent studio was called Open Design. The owner was Aldo Sessano. Aldo Sessano is an old Italian designer, very strong in the 70s and 80s, who was used to work with his own studio for Mitsubishi. He had a lot of business for Mitsubishi. He designed many Mitsubishi cars from the 70s, like the Lancer, the Colt. He worked also a lot for Seat, for example. He designed the Boccanegra, the Seat 1400 Coupe, and also for Scania and for many other customers. So I started to work there. But the first few projects I did were all for Mitsubishi, so for Japanese companies. And Japan design at that time, car design in Japan at that time was really booming. It was just like showing things that in Europe we have never seen at that time. And it was really like a fireworks of car design. And so being working there, I was interested by this. I was looking at many Japanese magazines because we had those because we were working for Japan. And so I was quite attracted. And then later on, I got in contact with some Japanese designers who just opened a brand new design studio in Japan called Design Club International in Hakone. And their objective was to have international designers. So they contact me and they asked me if I was interested to go there. And for me, it was almost like something that I was not looking for directly, but I was somehow expecting it. And so when this offer came, I went there to just to check. We discussed a little bit, and then I said, okay, I'll go. And I took 2 suitcases and I left for Japan. I wasn't speaking Japanese. I was almost not even speaking English at that time.
That's incredible.
And that was it.
And and how long did you stay at that point when you got to Japan?
I stayed 4 years. I had the first contract was for 2 years, but then they renewed it. They wanted me to stay longer, and I renewed it because I thought it was good to spend more years in Japan. 2 years in Japan is very short because Japan is a very complex country. You just after 2 years you start to understand a little bit, and you get a bit more used to it. So the second 2 years were much more fruitful for me, and no, it was fantastic. It was a fantastic opportunity.
Fabio, I guess open design was maybe not your typical traditional studio, but I wonder if what were the obvious culture shocks for you going from that after landing in Japan?
As a studio, not so much. In a sense, Open Design was a very little studio. We were at the maximum, we were 5 people.
Wow.
And we were doing the work I was doing here in Japan. It was the same, basically, designing, doing sketches, renderings, then full-size drawings, and then following mock-ups, scale mock-ups, full-size mock-ups, mostly in clay. That was the biggest difference. So I started really to practice, even though I did a little bit of clay at the design school in Torino for scale models. I started to practice to develop models with clay modelers here in Japan, very specialized because they are really good, as you might know, and using all the typical, I would say, American international techniques at that time of modeling, and getting used to that. Because before I was in Italy, still in the middle 80s in Italy, most of the models, the mock-ups were done in hard materials. And so I was dealing with plaster, with Epowood, doing full-size piano di forma, like 4 views, full-size technical drawing with all the sections. So I learned a lot, by the way, by doing that, because you have to construct the car dimension on your head first. And when I arrived here, I started to practice more about tape drawings and be more flexible with modelers working on clay full-size models, being much more used to that. So probably was a great improvement for myself to try to put together the best after of what I've learned in Italy with what I was learning in Japan.
Fabio, what is it that makes those clay modelers, do you think, so brilliant in Japan? Because it's not the first time I've heard that. A friend of mine, Alan DeRosier, was saying, like, by far, they are, the term that he used, that they are killers. He's like, they are unbelievable. What do you think it is?
But I have to say, I've been working in many different countries with many different modeling techniques and many different modelers. And I would put together also the digital modelers, because they also have different training, different experiences. If we talk particularly about physical modeling, going from hard to clay or clay particularly, I think Japanese generally, but you can find that also on Korean modelers, for example, very similar. They have this tendency to be very, very precise, very constructed in their approach. So, for example, you have to be very precise too, okay? While I was working with some incredibly good Italian modeler that is where he was used to work with hard models, and then he worked with clay, and he was telling me, clay, it's easy, it's just like hard, but it's softer. And and so he was applying the same way of doing things, and he was very fast and great. But everyone, every school or every country or every culture has his own way of doing things, and you have to get maybe ready to understand that. I work with French modelers, for example. I had some very good French modelers, which they tend maybe to be a bit more interpretative. They try to interpret what you want to do, and eventually they try to propose things. Sometimes it could be a little bit disturbing, but if you get the right guy, you do incredible things. I guess with modeler it becomes a lot from the, how can I say, the good matching between the designer and the modeler. But the
Yes.
designer itself has to be able to adapt or to understand, and the modeler vice versa. So working with Japanese designer, it's easy in a certain way because it's very precise. You need to be precise, you need to be clear, and whatever you say, they do it. And they do it very refined, very precisely. But if you don't know what to do and you keep on turning around, they get mad because they keep on doing anything you ask them, and maybe they won't try to say, okay, but why don't we try to do another thing? And they try to maybe modify something. So they wait for that. So you have to be very precise and clear from your own.
Do you have a personal preference in term? I mean, I know that you are. It's probably been a while since you are working directly with a modeler, but you personally, do you have a preference one way or the other?
About modeling techniques,
Yeah, I mean, just with regards to the whole notion of being like super precise or more interpretive, because I mean, at the end of the day, for me personally, being a primarily a digital modeler, if we have a tight time scale, there's absolutely no time for like a designer coming in and going like, can we just try and capture this feeling? You know, it's like, you know, we've got like a very short time to put this exterior together, and you definitely need to be precise in what you want, and we will get there very quickly, you know, rather than using the modeler as a sketch tool. At the same time, if we've got the time to be experimental, and the designer is kind of like, look, I've kind of got this idea, why don't you sketch something in? I'm also very receptive to that personally, but if you don't have time to do something and you keep on getting sent on a wild goose chase to kind of, you know, try out all these different things for them to eventually go back to the first thing, that can be very frustrating. So I can understand both sides of the coin. I wonder what if you have a preference either way.
yeah, I understand both sides, but I have a clear preference in a sense. I mean, designing is a complex process, and the modeling part, either in physical, either in digital, is part of the creative process. So it's not possible to have a straight line from design, from the idea to execution. So sometimes, and especially when you want to try to do things that are maybe more extreme or maybe less conventional, you have to experiment a little. Sometimes you get also lost, and you need to probably find a way to get back, and that happened to everyone. What I don't like to keep on wasting time and turning around directly on a model because the designer doesn't know what to do. That one I don't accept even from my designers. I had the chance to learn to do design by working the old Italian way. My first experience, I say that also in my books. I have here my book, and I tell this story. That my first full-size exterior model I did, it was at Cessano for Mitsubishi in 1985. And I got selected from my sketches, from my rendering. The rendering already was not just a sketch. It was a rendering on 1/10, side view, front view. So already every line he was trying to fit the package, and every line, the back line, it was not just like cheating and being high. It was the right height where it's supposed to be.
Right.
The wheel dimension were the right dimension. So the wheel arch in the drawing, we designed them by correcting every single curve. So there was this process of trying to define the design already in the drawing. So you didn't have much more flexibility after to improvise. But that was an old way of doing things. Probably now it could be different. But anyway, learning in that way, when I was selected, I got this, the owner, Sessano, came and told me, okay, now you do the full-size piano di forma. And I never expected to do that because I never did that. I did it in little scale. So you start to just spend 3 days to put your 5 meter for 2 meter paper on the wall. And every time you do it, because I was doing it alone plus, every time you do it, then the thing goes down one way, goes down one. Then you spend the whole day trying to stretch it, and the next morning the thing is just like coming down because of the night and the humidity, whatever. And you have to redo it again. But then I just spent also another day just to trace all the grill. And you have to trace it with a big point pen. And the grill, it has to be 10 centimeter, 10 centimeter, but it doesn't have to be 10 centimeter and 1 millimeter. Because at the end, if you do 1 millimeter every time, at the end it's going to be 5 centimeters or more.
Yeah.
Okay, different. So already starting that was an exercise. Then I did the full size, all the sections by hand with flexible curves and everything, trying to get all the right points in every view. So basically it's like constructing a 3D digital model.
Wow.
But you do it in your head and you trace it on the paper. Because every line you do in front view, you have to know that in the side view it does that. So that's the way I'm used to build up the design. And when I did this, I delivered it to the model maker. And the model maker told me, okay, you come in 2 weeks, we will show you the model. So I went back there 2 weeks later, there was a hard Epowood model already done.
Wow.
And I looked at the car and I said, well, that's the car I designed. But the side view doesn't look exactly like I expected. It was a little bit too flat. I was expecting something more. And the guy looked at me and told me, who designed those lines? You did it, And I said, yeah, I did it, but it's the first time I didn't imagine how it was looking. And so they said, okay. We give you the opportunity to change it, but once, because we will have to break all the side, putting back the resin again. And so you do it only once. I'm not going to redo it. So I had to do the new sections, deliver it. 10 days later, the car was finished, painted, and was sent to Japan. So you think experimenting was not probably the most easiest way at those times. Then you discover a lot of possibilities. Clay gives you plenty of possibilities. But you don't have to approach a mock-up by saying, okay, I go there and I start to do something, because you have people working on it. You have time to respect, you have cost. You need your design to be clear in your mind before doing it. And then if it doesn't work, you have to be able to say, okay, no, it doesn't work. Shall we try something different? But you cannot just go there and say, oh, let's try this. No, maybe it's not nice. Let's try this. 1, 2, the third time is going to be already too much. Another point, if you keep on modifying, there is a moment where you have to know how to stop and when to stop. Because you could always say, oh, but I can change again that little line there. And it's by doing this that you just ruin the design. It's like in a drawing. There is a moment where if you don't stop, you keep on doing things and the drawing gets ruined. And in 3D digital model probably is the same. So to get back to finalize what you were asking, I like to be very precise on my indication, but I like to be flexible enough to get back, change, listening some people advice. And in a certain way, for example, in digital, I never liked people who interpreted too much, because sometimes I had my idea, but to achieve the idea, I was asking them to do the surface one at a time and showing me, like in a hard model,
With the
the
intersection.
theoretical lines. If a modeler would start to make his own radius and mix it up again already, I would say, no, stop it, stop, stop, go back. I wanted to see all the construction lines, deciding how to move them, and then after we decide how to blend them. I don't want someone who blends the thing before I understand what's going on. For example, that was one thing I was always quite picky when I was working with digital modelers, but physical modelers too.
I mean, I think that's a brilliant perspective to have, because I think, like, at the end of the day, you are creating a sculpture and it is a collaborative process, and there is no blueprint for it. Because of that, and because of how complex a car is, I think to start off with, you need to have a pretty clear idea about where you want to go. Because as you highlighted, even with you having like spent time tweaking the side view, tweaking the front view, tweaking the rear view, there is always, always, always going to be a surprise when you get something physical back. And then you will inevitably end up making changes, and also maybe you need to be open to suggestions from other people. But if there's no vision to start off with, you're going to get very lost in the process.
Yeah, it's true, because, and that is true for any type of process. I mean, if you are physical, if you are digital, if you are with hard material or with soft material, I think you need to have that clear vision, a clear path to follow, but at the same time, the flexibility to be able to change your direction, to get a little bit step back from once in a while, and then trying to create something new that at the same time you're having the control of it, or you know exactly what you are doing, or you learn by doing it. I think yeah, that's the same either if you work with digital or with physical.
There's also like a parallel analogy that you could maybe argue with in Photoshop. I remember I listened to an interview with Klaus Busser, I think it was, and he was talking about like going up to a designer's desk, and they're in Photoshop and they're flicking on all the different layers on and off, and the car's kind of morphing in front of you. And he's like, it's too much. There's too many different options. Like, pick, what is your vision? What do you want to say? Like, choose a particular path and convince me that this is the right one to go with. It comes down to vision at the end of the day. And with these digital tools, they're brilliant. And I work in digital tools, but without any sort of clear direction, you can get it. It just becomes this slider, that is like constantly changing, and it can be very confusing if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, no, it's right. I mean, all the digital world is like that because of its intangibility. That's why you need even more a sort of strong and clear self-control of the process. And it's difficult to build up that control starting directly with digital, but you need to have someone who tells you, who teach you. That's the role of the directors, it's the role of the senior designers, the role to tell to those young people who gets all the opportunity to do anything they want, because a digital tool gives you the possibility to do anything they want. I've been lately doing I've been going back to draw on normal paper and doing sketching. For example, the illustration for my book I did, and I did it on purpose by hand. There was no Photoshop, nothing at all. But I was quite scared of making mistakes, especially at the end of the drawing. That maybe you make something and it drops a stain of something, or you pull a wrong line, and you waste everything, and you have to throw it away and start from zero. With digital tools, you can just
Control Z.
cancel and
Yeah.
get back. Um, it's great. I mean, it's fantastic to have so many opportunities. But when you have a total freedom, then you lose also the sense of what you are doing, or you lose the capacity to make choices. The role of designer probably is mostly about making choices, about being able at a certain time to make a choice. And if you keep on adding things, that you see it also on the products. There are products who are overcharged with signs, and they get more and more and more. Like, okay, I'll do a bit more because it's going to be more interesting. No, it's not going to be more interesting. It's going to be more confused and less understandable. It's like doing a poetry by filling it up with adjectives. It's not going to be a better poetry. It's going to be something that nobody understands.
Fabio, how can people fight that kind of paralysis by analysis? You know, like what would you recommend for being for not getting lost in that ultimate like endless decision making?
Well, it's not an easy task. You have to learn it with the years. But to learn it with the years, you need to learn it also in the condition that allows you to learn it. I had the chance to be facing many different challenges in different conditions, different situations. As I said, I was starting with the most traditional, even plaster modeling. And you know, when you do a plaster modeling, if you do something wrong, the guy has to start with an axe and just hit down all the side of the car. So you think twice before making a mistake, or you think twice before asking. So those constraints somehow oblige you to reinforce your skill on knowing what to do, or knowing how to sort them out. And when you have freedom, you take full advantage of the freedom without getting lost, because you still remember that there is a moment where you have to finally become consistent. But if you start already with a total freedom, you don't know what to do. So you need someone in the way that helps you, someone with more experience, someone with some seniority, who helps you to understand and learn those things. Helps you, for example, facing a digital model or a physical model. You look at the thing is started from your drawing, but is not corresponding to the drawing. And then you start to say, oh, maybe it's the position of the lamp, so I move the lamps. Maybe the lamp is a bit too small, I make it a bit bigger. Or maybe the rear wheel arch is a little bit. And you start to move all of those parameters at the same time. That's wrong. You have to also being able to split and separate the different level of parameters. If you judge a model, you first work on proportions, and you make sure you get the right proportion before starting to work on surfacing. And when you have the surface done, then you work on details. Because if you start to redo and turn around a detail with the surface beneath that is wrong, you will keep on wasting your time. So there is a moment you have to say, okay, first I just think about the proportion. I want to work on proportion. I want to work on the main concept. Now the concept is clear, the proportions are right. Start to work on surfacing. Maybe I try different surfacing. And when everything is, then you go on details. But you have to learn that. You have to understand that. You have to have maybe a modeler who tell you, hey guy, we are not going to spend this time to do on and on this front fender while the whole rest of the car is wrong. And maybe you learn it on the job, but you need the people who tell you. You need the people who have the experience.
But you know what the problem I find a lot is that you will have a young designer who he maybe knows that, and you can have that conversation with him, but then he will still fixate on those details, even right at the beginning, because he wants to try and impress his bosses. So he, in his mind, he thinks like, you know, if I add in this cool vent, or if I add in you know, all these color splits and everything, when we're just looking at proportions, then they're going to think that, oh, this guy's amazing. And so they're always constantly trying to strive to do everything at once, you know. And I think it's not only them to blame because because, you know, the timescales for developing these things are shorter. But like what you're talking about now is absolutely invaluable, and it's not something that certainly we were taught at university. And I know a lot of universities or design colleges don't talk about that because they probably don't even know about that, you know.
But what you said is right, because at that time, in that case that you have been sort of explaining, the fault is not of the young designer, the fault is the boss. So I've seen also many very senior designer or experienced director who just couldn't understand those things. So I don't know how it comes, but or maybe I've seen people who are supposed to be good designer and experienced designer, but they would keep on insisting on working on our headlamps and saying, why do you don't put the headlamps? Or what, the grill is not good. I'm saying, listen, man, we are still deciding about 3 different packages. I've been working on digital to show 3 volumetric models to define what is the best package for this car. I'm not going to give a damn something about your headlamps, because what we have to focus now is defining if the car is a shooting brake, if it's a traditional coupe, if it's a fastback, and it seems that those people were not understanding it, and he was the boss.
I think that's a really great notion to have, and I don't think it's necessarily, you know, there's a lot of bosses that are not necessarily willing to take that responsibility to say, like, actually, the fact that this young guy or girl is so lost is a lot to do with me as well. You know, I could pull them aside and say, listen, I know you want to deliver your best and you want to go over and above what is required. But right now, as you said, we just want to define whether or not this is a shooting brake or a saloon or whatever the case is. And I think in that respect, it probably, look, you never want to limit anybody and you never want to stifle the creative process. But I've worked in some places where those sort of standards, those sort of things are kind of standardized almost. So they make it clear, like, look, you can throw in a light graphic, but just do a light graphic and a color split. You know, but don't, you know, start trying to throw in lamp internals and all that sort of stuff when we are defining the package.
Yeah, no, that
Yeah.
is right. For example, I tell you another little episode of my youth, probably. One of the things I did that was probably still one of my best designs, personal, was an interior for a Renault concept car called Renault Initial Paris from '95. And the idea of this whole interior was having very simple and clean surfaces, very just, how can I say, a section that was extruded by looking like the shape would have done out of bended wood, for example, and then geometrical volume intersecting each other. But because it was also without having any buttons visible, not even the instruments were visible. So I really wanted to achieve this sort of purity, absolute purity. But the biggest problem was in the way to try to express that I was fearing that in a drawing, people would look at the drawing and say, but there is nothing in your design, you know? Because even during the model, because making the model, we made it by foam, and then we made it by clay. But the model, it was just a shape that was almost too basic, while this basic shape was getting completely, how can I say, 1,000 times enhanced when the material were on top of it. You know, because it was made on purpose to enhance the effect of the materials. And so I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but it was difficult in this intermediate process with the technique of that time, was mostly renderings and foam models, to make it appear as could appear at the end. The lucky thing was that I had, my boss was Patrick Lequemont. And Patrick Lequemont just looked at that and said, I can immediately see what you are trying to do. I think this is very new, is very fresh, is very strong. Let's go with that.
Wow.
So sometimes I was even doing things a bit more complicated just to try to make sure I could convince him. And he would look and say, no, you don't need that. You don't need that. Go back to your original idea. I'm sure it will be stronger. So I could do it because of that. I was quite insecure in the process in between. But at the end, I was very happy that the thing came out very well, exactly as I expected.
I mean, I think when you've got the support of somebody like that, it's invaluable. You know, I think it's no secret that, you know, if you give somebody the confidence and the support to try new things, the result and the process is going to be far more superior than if somebody is constantly living in fear or in a vacuum of that, oh, they're going to get into trouble because I was asked to do this and I maybe tried something different. And I think, well, somebody like Patrick is just, you know, you look at all the people that's worked under him and all the projects that he's done. I mean, he's obviously, you know, a very, very special director. I've never had the pleasure to meet him, but I just, you know, what is it that made him so brilliant?
Well, he's a man of a lot of interest, great culture. He is a man of mixed culture, so because he's French and English at the same time. He has been working in Germany, and so he probably tried to combine all of this with probably the best part of the French culture that I've also been taking a lot of advantage of that when I was at Renault, which is a sort of intellectual approach to things. Sometimes it's a bit too much intellectual, so it becomes lost in that sort of philosophical things. Fortunately, I'm Italian, so I'm a bit more pragmatic. And but I learned a lot. So he was always trying to look at deep. He still is, because he's doing a great career now designing boats. But he has been always interested on the conceptual aspects, and then also giving opportunity to people to experiment. For example, in my case, what I've been done later trying to apply on my own management career was always to first try to build up with the designers, with the team, a clear vision by giving them vision, giving them directions, exchanging with them, trying to find a sort of common ground to play and to design. And then asking them, please, go ahead in that direction, being very precise. I was trying always to give very straightforward orientation. In a sense, the designer was expecting already something quite defined from myself. But at the same time, I was saying, please do this. Then if you find better idea, or if you want to experiment something different, don't hesitate. But make sure at least you do this. Because I think that's also the role of a design director, giving a vision and giving a direction to it, not just picking up left and right what comes.
Fabio, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the Italian design education when you were studying. I know that you had an architectural background. Was that due to the fact that there wasn't any design schools, like car design courses established yet at that time? Or were you interested in architecture and you wanted to have a different approach? What was the landscape like at that time in terms of education?
Yeah, I think both. In a way, I always wanted to design cars, but at the same time, I was really into architecture in any case, actually even more into architecture now than before. And at the same time, as you said, there were not so many officially defined car design schools. There was one in Torino at that time, not two, one in Torino, and is the one I did. But at the same time, I was doing also architecture because it was not at the level of master of high level degree. While the architecture university, Politecnico di Milano, which actually today is one of the top design schools and architectural design school as a university in the world, and it's the top one in the charts in Italy, international charts. So it was for me a very good reference to learn about design, because Milano was mostly about also product design and about architecture, and to understand how to develop a project. What you learn from architecture, then I've been trying to apply on my car design projects, is exactly what I was explaining before. Having a project, it means to project yourself. So you project yourself towards a target or a place where you want to be, and then you try to build up the path to arrive there. And the path is made of different steps. So you try to set those steps, those milestones, by aiming where you want to go, but you know in advance because you have been constructing this. That's typical architectural approach. Then, as I said before, you also learn that you don't have to keep on going always straight. Sometimes taking different roads is going to be much better and much more fun. But at least you start with this approach. And that was what I really also tried to apply from my architectural background to my projects, particularly when I was working on interior design.
That's really interesting. I mean, when you talking about the process and managing projects and deconstructing something that's not just a dream. You are actually you have a vision, you have a goal, and then you break down the intermediate steps to get there. And I think that something like that is invaluable. And again, probably not taught enough. And not talked about enough. Fabio, the other question that I was going to have on the subject specifically of architecture. I mean, I don't know anything about architectural studies, but I always viewed it as something that would be incredibly technical in terms of learning about stress analysis and all that sort of stuff. Were you ever kind of bogged down by all of those sort of things?
At that time, now it's different. Now there are more specific, how can I say, specific degrees that you can have, specialized in design, specialized in construction, specialized in restoration, specialized in urbanistic. At that time, it was much more general, but there were some sort of main guidelines that would define your how can I say, your specialization after. So there was already a sort of design-oriented guideline. So I spent less time studying those very typical, I would say, ingegneristic and complex topics like matters like scienze delle costruzioni, construction science, and statics. I had to do the exams for those, because the University of Architecture in Milano is you have 30 exams to do.
Wow.
Along 5 years of course of classes, and you participate to workshop, you participate to classes, but you have the exams to do. And if you don't go through all of them, you keep on doing. And then at the end, you do the thesis, which takes you maybe 1.5 years minimum to prepare it. And nothing. I mean, I had few fixed exams that every architect should have, the basics. But then I was more oriented in a history of art, of architecture, and then design, product design. I did a bit more of that. I took classes, for example, from Achille Castiglione, which was one of the biggest master of Italian design, from
Yeah.
Marco Zanuso. When I had my thesis degree, the president of the committee, of the degree committee, was Thomas Maldonado, who passed away 2 years ago. He was a theoretician of design and the president of the International Design Association worldwide. He was one of the teachers at Ulm of Schule for Gestaltung. So I mean, a guy with a very deep philosophical understanding. And you learn all of those things. Probably those are the things that are missing mostly on car design schools today, where you learn much more about the techniques, but maybe not enough about the purpose have to use the techniques.
And Fabio, you all through that time, you are still at the back of your mind, you know that you want to become a car designer.
I was already, in fact, because for the first part, I was already working as a car designer while I was still studying. And then I stopped to work for 2 years because I couldn't finish to study if I kept on working. So I decided, okay, I stopped now. I finished my study, and as soon as I finished, I went to Japan because I got this opportunity.
Wow, that's incredible. And so that obviously helped you inform your decisions on what to focus on at university, because I don't want to keep on dragging this out, but it's quite something that is quite novel to me, and quite and something that I wish that I'd been a bit more switched on about when I was studying, is that there were quite a few. I've spoken to quite a few designers that realized that actually I'm going to get employed at the end of the day based on what's in my portfolio. So this particular assignment, I just need to get through it, but I shouldn't let that consume all of my creative energy, because your portfolio is going to suffer. Or and I, at the end of the day, I think there was a lot of people in my year at least that were chasing this mark, like I need to get a 2-1, or I need to get a first class degree. But then you look at what's in their portfolio, and mine as well, and it was like, you probably should have just not worried so much about this theoretical assignment and focus more on your drawing skills or your communication, for example. So I think, it's quite interesting that you had that kind of vision at that stage as well. That you knew what to not get too bogged down about these theoretical things.
I think is a delicate balance when a young student is trying to define his future and is passionate about car design and he goes to car design schools. The point is, for example, at that time, at my time, it was already at the end. There were starting to be design schools in Italy. But before, for example, most of those big masters of Italian car design, they were not coming from any school. They just learned on the job, or they were just talented people who just did some drawing and showed themselves to Pininfarina or to Bertone with their portfolio and saying, "Look at my drawing. Do you think okay? Tomorrow you start and you learn." It was something like that. Of course, today is not like that. There is a chance of so many different technologies that helps, but probably there is too much of thinking about the technique and missing the purpose. I'm used to quote, also in my book, I quote a saying from Orson Welles when he was doing his first movies, and everyone was so excited by his technique of filming, of doing post-production, and everyone was talking to him and saying, "Oh, your technique is fantastic, you're a genius." And he would say, "Oh, come on, technique, you learn it in 4 days. It's not technique. It's just all the thing you have to do with technique that is going to be important. Is what you do with it." and that it takes years and years to learn what to do. So I think today I see too many people being so concentrated on the rendering techniques, Photoshop, on 3D digital videos. They're all master. They're all master of that. But not many people still consider or really try to consider or be critical about what design is. It's like I usually do this example. It's like having an orchestra full of people who can make the best sound out of their instruments. And they do incredible sounds. They know everything to play with their instruments, but they don't know about music. So I guess we have to get back to teach about design.
Yeah.
What design is, what is the purpose, what is the sense itself of design. I think the discussion today on design, you see thousands of incredible renderings on websites, and everyone makes like, great, cool dude, fantastic. Is everything cool? But is that purposeful? Is that a concept or is just an illustration? And I'm lacking to see this. I'm lacking to see the concepts behind. And then people say, oh, but the drawing was so great, but the car is not that great. Yes, because the drawing was just a flashy, cheated thing. While if you do a drawing faithful to what is going to be the original design, the reality, you will realize that it's not going to look good. And then you start to think and wonder how you can do it to make it look good. I think we are probably missing the point. We are missing completely the point. And you see it on the cars you see on the street.
I agree as well. And you know, the difficult thing is, no, but it's totally true. You know, there's some really disgusting cars out there. But the point is that I think, you know, it's so difficult to give advice to everybody because, you know, one person might have these great ideas, but they don't have the skills that you're talking about now that so many people on Instagram, for example, have mastered. But then you get the guy that does this big flashy Photoshop rendering, and there's no thought behind, you know, what he's trying to achieve, and it's just like almost, you know, there's a series on Netflix that I love and I've quoted quite a few times, and there's in the first series, there's an episode with a graphic designer, a guy called Christoph Niemann. He does these beautiful, he's done a lot of covers for the New Yorker, for example. And he said, you know, the problem with craft is that it stops you from asking the right questions. So in the beginning, you know, you are so focused on being able to create this beautiful image or this great model, and then and you get so obsessed with that you actually forget to stop and ask the right questions, like, why am I doing this? What is it for? You know, where are we going in all of this? And it's constantly, you have to constantly go back and forth between those two things.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, design is supposed to be the same. And again, I'm not saying that I don't want people do exciting renderings, but I'm saying that instead of a flashy rendering of a meaningless concept, I rather prefer a purposeful concept done with a pencil on the edge of a piece of paper, because that's the design. It's not drawing, it's not illustration. Again, we see everyone is talking design. This design is good. This design. They are talking about the drawing. They are talking about the image.
And
they're not talking about the object. And one of the things is even more dangerous because it's implicit on the incredible technology that we handle today, is because If you were doing something just fake or stupid with a pencil and markers, it would look like that. But if you are doing it and then rendering it in a video that moves around the city and digitally is just super flashy, people just get completely overwhelmed by that, and they don't look anymore inside. And that's the risk. The risk, we should, technology is great, but it depends what you do with it.